Alright guys, here we are ready to start painting. Today we're going to start with the background, which is the sky. So I'm going to show you how to do two basic skies. You might want to watch the video all the way through and then pick which one you want to practice and then do it. Just replay the video and do it again, whichever one you want to do. You can notice I'm all set up here. Got my watercolor paints, I've got my paper tape down, got my cup of water, got my nice watercolor brush. This is a Eurotrek number 6. Most of you guys have either a 6, 8, or a 9, sometimes they're praying. This is a natural hair brush, will hold a lot of water, but it'll also give me a pretty good point. You will have different watercolor brushes, some pretty big and some pretty small depending on what you want to do. We'll get into that a little bit later. So a medium-sized brush will work fine. I'm going to begin by drawing a little bit, so just a nice number 2 pencil, lightly sketching. You should have reference photos that you're going from. I'm going to draw this out of my head, and you guys can just also basically pick one of these. I'm going to do two. The first one I'm just going to make kind of like a hilly landscape. I'm going to put the horizon line about a third of the way down. That's implementing the rule of thirds, which you'll learn about later if you don't already know about it. So a couple lines here, one for a distant horizon and one for kind of a middle ground horizon. I might even go ahead and make like another line. Maybe it could be a river or a road or something. I'm not quite sure yet. Actually, that would be good to make that into a road that goes behind that hill in the front here. So one line there, one line here. Got a little road coming out from behind that hill, and it's going to wrap its way around here. Some perspective there. Maybe I'll put a fence here eventually. Maybe I can draw a few lines just to sort of envision it, just to get my perspective right. So you can see I've got my elements of background, middle ground, foreground, leading the eye in. On the other one that I'm going to do is going to be kind of a, like I said, you got to pick one of these to practice with. This one I'm going to put the horizon down toward the bottom and just make kind of like a rocky, imagining like a southwest type feel, desert type thing. So maybe just something really simple like that. So just some big rocks for the horizon, a line underneath that. Once again, I've got my background, my middle ground, and my foreground leading me in. I'm going to do two different types of sky today. Basically, you'll have two different types of skies. There are lots of different kinds of clouds, but in your watercolor paintings, generally they're either cumulonimbus, which are like puffy clouds, or they are stratus, which are like the stretched out clouds. So we're going to do both. I'm going to do the cumulonimbus or puffy clouds up here on this one. I'm going to do the stratus clouds on my desert scene. So I begin by getting my brush wet and getting my paper wet. Now, when I put the paint on the paper, you'll notice if I'm using good watercolor paper, it doesn't immediately absorb. It kind of sits up on top, which is exactly what we want, because we're going to be doing some things with the paint and the water together. I'm not going to get the paper wet past my horizon. I'm just going to get the water in the sky. And as I'm doing this, you'll notice I'm kind of making puddles by doing little circular motions with my brush. I'm not stretching the water out. I'm going to do that on the next one for my desert scene. With this, I'm just blotting the water on there, letting it pool up, and that's going to receive the pigment really, really well. Alright, so it's very important to use watercolor paper. If you do this with a sketchbook, you can do it, but it's going to start absorbing right away, whereas this is sitting up on top. You can see in the light reflection how it just kind of sits up on there. It'll dry eventually. Now, you don't oftentimes use the colors just straight out of the palette. You're going to do some mixing. So I'm going to use my blue here, and I'm going to start to break down the paint a little bit by adding some water to it And I'm just going to move some of this blue paint over here into the top of my tray. This becomes my mixing tray over here. Add a little bit more water so that I can get more pigment. The key is to have the perfect balance between the water and the pigment. You'll learn this through practice. If you want lighter colors, you add more water. If you want your colors to be a deeper saturation or darker, you add less water and treat it more like a regular paint. I'm going to go ahead and move into some purple here. I want my sky to kind of have a violet blue tint. So what I did there, I noticed how strong my purple was getting automatically, so I just went ahead and got some more blue and added some more blue into it. I think that's going to be a fine color for my sky right there. Now watch what happens if I take the paint and just begin to touch the paper with it, and look what happens. The color begins to bleed out into that water, which is the nice effect of watercolors. It'll do things for you kind of effortlessly, and as the pigment starts to pool and run and bleed, you want to try to look where it's going, or when you're using a reference photo, like, you'll have a cloud shape in mind that you're trying to target. You don't have to worry about getting it exactly like that. Or if you can see it in your mind's eye, you can see the shape of a cloud starting to materialize here. This is why I didn't put paint right there. So I can imagine another shape of a cloud, let's say right here. So I'm going to put the pigment around the edge of the shape. In other words, I'm leaving this big cloud shape here. Maybe there's a little bit more at the top. Come back and get some more pigment. Generally, skies are darker at the top and they get lighter toward the horizon. So if you want to experiment with putting more color on, do it toward the top of your paper. And I'm just letting that bleed down into a nice big cloud formation. Now, you can also control where the paint goes by washing your brush. And in this case, I'm not going to put more water on the paper. I'm going to dry my brush out. I got some Kleenexes here. Paper towel would work fine. And I can push that paint around. See how I'm pushing it back, creating that cloud shape. Again, if I wanted to make this quite a more distinct edge, I can push that with the brush. If I need to, I can add a little bit more water and push that back. You can also absorb with your Kleenex or paper towel. Watch, I'll show you here. I'm going to put a whole bunch of pigment down, and then I'm going to control where it goes by absorbing out some edges. So I just take the edge of the Kleenex and I just see how it just saturates up absorbs up the pigment. I mean, I can kind of even erase that whole entire shape if I wanted to. Let's say I wanted to make this a little bit more cloudy or light down here by the horizon. It's kind of like an eraser. And you can see it's starting to look a little bit more cloudy. The trick here, guys, is patience and restraint. The biggest mistake I've seen beginning watercolor students make is they'll do something that looks cool and they'll try to do it again and again, and they'll end up overworking it. If you see something cool happening, the thing you need to do is leave it alone. So I'm going to absorb this a little bit toward the horizon. I've got some nice cloud shapes starting to materialize in the sky. Maybe I do want to make a little bit more blue. I'm going to take just some straight blue and blend it into my my color that I already had on the paper. Just give it a little more saturated feel, and you can see how easy it is to blend. The colors, because of the water, will run right together. Now, I don't want to do the whole entire sky in one shot. I want to let this dry and then come back and layer. If you have a stormy sky, you know, purples and blacks kind of look really cool in there. But I'm just going to leave that alone for now. Leaving it really light toward the horizon, kind of dark up there at the top. We'll come back to this in a little bit when this is dry. Let's do that's the start of some puffy clouds. The next one, the stratus clouds. This one is really fun and easy to do. You'll see the blending right away on this one. Now in this one I'm not pooling up the water. I'm going to take the water and spread it all the way across the sky. Believe it or not, how you place the water is going to determine how the watercolor will show up on the paper. So it's this horizontal, left to right, all the way across the sky. I'm going to take it all the way down to the horizon and then kind of lighten it up at the horizon. And I'm going to start with my same kind of bluish purple at the top, but this is definitely going to transition into something else. Now watch what happens here if I put that all the way across and go into a little bit of blue. And then I'm going to imagine this as a sunset type scene. So I want to eventually get this to transition down to yellow. Now if I put yellow right there, I'm going to have a green sky. Hope you guys remember that with your color. So if I put some red right there, it's going to give me a nice violet, maybe kind of a pinkish. But the red and the blue will work okay together. Now I can move into some orange. I could just put yellow directly. I'm going to do that as an experiment to see what happens if I put yellow right here. That's going to be a little different than if I went to orange and then yellow. So I'll just add some water to my orange to break it down, and now I've got some orange and then yellow. Either way is fine. Clean the brush, dry it out a little bit, and just pull those colors together. I like the yellow. I'm going to add some more of that down here, letting it get really light toward the horizon. Eventually I'll come back and probably make that a little bit more bold. COVID. Excuse me. With a little bit of orange right there through the middle. So you can see this resembles more stratus clouds. Make a little bit more red here. Get this a little darker up at the top. Now once this is dry, I'm going to make some distinct stratus cloud shapes. I'm kind of preparing the way there for that by putting a little bit of orange in some places here and some red up at the top. Now wherever I pick up my brush, it's going to leave a pool. See what I just did there? I've got my orange, and wherever I pick it up, it's going to leave a pool. So you have to be able to control that either by erasing it, by taking your brush, drying it off, and backing it off, or by spreading the water and the paint enough to where you know when you pick it up it's not going to leave a pool, because you know how much water is on your brush. It just comes with practice. Pretty soon you'll be able to estimate how much water is on your brush, what's going to happen when you pick it up, and where. So begin with that. Those are your skies, your basic skies. Practice one of those for today. That's your assignment for today. Tomorrow we're going to work on the middle ground. We'll probably layer into the sky a little bit, and then I'll talk about your middle ground, maybe even foreground. So choose one of those and practice. Get you some reference photos if you haven't already got those. And have fun. Be patient. Let it dry. Let it dry. Let it dry, or the paint's going to bleed all over the place.